Finishing 1990 as the two worst teams in the league, the Minnesota Twins and the Atlanta Braves completely flipped the script, and they both ended up winning the pennant, then going on to play in the greatest World Series of all time. So let's look at how they got there, and that great series.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
A real turning point in the history of the Braves franchise came halfway through 1990. Russ Nixon had been the manager since 1988 after Chuck Tanner was fired, and after starting 1990 25-40, Nixon would be fired. And who would GM Bobby Cox hire as the next manager? That would be himself. Perhaps becoming manager again was always his intentions in his GM tenure, but either way, from then on, the Braves would change forever. Though they ended 1990 with just 65 wins and a last place finish, there was reason for excitement. The converted outfielder Ron Gant received MVP votes, and Dale Murphy's replacement David Justice won Rookie of the Year. Meanwhile, the three pitchers developed under his watch in Glavine, Smoltz, and Avery made up the bulk of their rotation. And going into 1991 with some hope, but expectations not too high, John Shirless was hired to replace Cox as GM, someone who was at the realm when the Royals won the '85 World Series, but many Royals fans also blame him for the dismantling of the team that led to a 27-year playoff drought. Also not giving him too much credit for the '85 team, as much of the talent came before him. Either way, he made his way to Atlanta with great respect for Bobby Cox, saying he wouldn't take the job without him as the manager, knowing Cox had built a great system for the future. And building on everything built, he would add Terry Pendleton, Rafael Belliard, Otis Nixon, Lonnie Smith, Deion Sanders, and Sid Bream, adding veterans to a young team and improving the defense along the way. And with Cox establishing a no-nonsense business-like clubhouse, the Braves were the surprise team of the year in '91. They would go 94-68, and they won the NL West by 1 game, with Terry Pendleton winning the MVP, and just the third time they had made the playoffs since coming to Atlanta in 1966. And it was the great defense and pitching that got them there, and a big part was John Smoltz, who would later say that Cox saved his career. He started the year with a 2-11 record and a 5.16 ERA, with everyone calling for him to be released or sent down, but he expressed his confidence in him, and he stuck with him, as he would finish the year going 12-2 with an ERA of 2.63. In the NLCS against the Pirates, he would win Game 3. Then in Game 7 on the road, he would throw a complete game shutout for the Braves' first pennant in Atlanta, also becoming the first NL team to finish the previous year in last, then win the pennant the next year. And on the other side, the Minnesota Twins weren't baseball's punchline, but after finishing last in the AL West with a 74-88 record in 1990, the stigma was real. Just 3 years removed from a World Series title, they had slipped badly. The pitching staff was thin, the defense was sloppy, and even stars like Kirby Puckett, Hrbek, and Gary Gaetti showed signs of decline, and the clubhouse tension didn't help either. By the time Gaetti departed for California in '91, the Twins were a team in transition, and that winter, the front office made 2 bold moves. They signed Chili Davis, a solid hitter, but not a proven slugger, and hometown ace Jack Morris, who was coming off a rough year in Detroit. So just like the Braves, there was some optimism, but hopes weren't too high. And when they stumbled with a 2-9 start, fans wondered if anything really changed. But then came June. Out of nowhere, they won 15 games in a row, their longest streak since moving to Minnesota in 1961. And that run put them on the top of the AL West, and once they got there, they never looked back. They finished 95-67 for the best record in the American League. Chili Davis proved his critics wrong, hitting 29 home runs with 93 RBIs. Jack Morris rediscovered his form, winning 18 games with a 3.43 ERA and 10 complete games. And he wasn't alone. Scott Erickson won 20 games, Kevin Tapani added 16 more, and rookie second baseman Chuck Knobloch gave the lineup a spark, and the timing was great. The Oakland A's run was coming to an end, and the Twins were ready to fill the void. In the LCS, they faced a revamped Blue Jays team led by Roberto Alomar, Joe Carter, and Devin White. But the Twins were ready, as they won the series in 5 games. Jack Morris won both of his starts, Kirby Puckett came alive with clutch hits and home runs, and the bullpen was flawless, tossing over 18 innings without allowing a single run. And just a year after finishing in last, the Twins were AL champions once again, punching their ticket to one of the most unforgettable World Series ever played between the league's worst the previous year. Considering where these teams were a year ago, it was hard to fathom that they were both here, making it a perfect story and what would go well past expectations. In Game 1, the Twins had Jack Morris on the mound, who was lined up against Charlie LeBrand. The game would remain scoreless until the bottom of the third, when Chuck Knobloch drove in Dan Gladden, and the Twins would extend the lead to 4 after Greg Gagne threw a home run in the 5th, which would end the day for LeBrand. Ron Gant would go on to drive in the only 2 runs for the Braves, and the only earned runs off Morris, as the Twins took Game 1 5-2. And for a sign of things to come, only one more game in the series would have a higher run differential. And in Game 2, the Twins would have their ERA leader with Kevin Tapani on the mound, up against that year's Cy Young winner in Tom Glavine. Tapani started with a 1-2-3 inning, and Glavine would start with a 2-base error that came as a result of miscommunication between David Justice and Mark Lemke. and after a walk, Kirby Puckett would ground into a double play, and assuming that pop-up would have been caught, the double play would have ended the inning. And of course, the next batter, Chili Davis, would hit a 2-run home run, which goes as 2 unearned runs for Glavine. The Braves got one back on a sac fly by Brian Hunter, and 1 inning later, one of the more controversial plays in World Series history ended the third and scoring chance for the Braves, when first base umpire Drew Cobble called Ron Gant out on a throwback to first after he came off the bag. Hrbek and Gant got tangled on a throwback to first, and though it appeared Hrbek pulled Gant off the bag, the first base ump did not call interference, and the inning would end there, a controversial play that made Hrbek hate in Atlanta and led to him even receiving death threats. The game would remain 2-1 after the inning, and it stayed the same until the top of the 5th, when the Braves had another sac fly by Rafael Belliard to tie the game. Both pitchers made it to the 8th, and despite having runners on with their 3 and 4 hitters up, the Braves could not score. There are reports that Glavine was in disbelief they didn't score, and if his emotion took over, the Twins took advantage right away, with Glavine giving up a home run on the first pitch of the inning, giving Glavine his only earned run and being the difference in the game after Rick Aguilera struck out the side in the 9th, giving us a classic and controversial Game 2. And Game 3 gave us one of the best World Series games ever played, and the first ever World Series game played in the Deep South. The game started similar as it did for the Braves in Game 2, with miscommunication between David Justice and Ron Gant. They gave Dan Gladden a triple off NLCS MVP Steve Avery, and Chuck Knobloch would hit a sac fly to drive in the first run. And on the mound for the Twins was 20-game winner Scott Erickson. He gave up his first run the second off a Rafael Belliard single that Greg Olson would score on. The game remained 1-1 till the bottom of the 4th, when David Justice hit a home run, giving the Braves the first lead of the entire series. Scott Erickson had the earliest action in the series after being taken out in the 5th after giving up a home run to Lonnie Smith, and getting charged with an earned run after a base-loaded walk by David West. And even after Kirby Puckett hit a solo home run in the 7th, it still looked like the Braves were going to get the first win with a 2-run lead. But then the top of the 8th started with an error by Terry Pendleton, which would end the day for Steve Avery, and brought in the Braves closer Alejandro Pena, who had not pitched in nearly a week. And on his 3rd pitch, Chili Davis had a game-tying 2-run home run. Then both Carl Willis and Pena would escape scoring threats in the 9th to send the game to extra innings. Mike Stan would come into the game, and both him and Mark Guthrie would escape scoring chances in the 10th and get 1-2-3 innings in the 11th. Then the 12th, the Twins ran into a problem with the amount of substitutions they made, leaving just 3 pitchers on their bench and no position players. The Twins would load the bases after Kirby Puckett was intentionally walked, which brought up the pitcher spot. And because of this, Rick Aguilera had to come in from the bullpen to hit. He actually came up with the Mets as an infielder and put a good swing on the 3rd pitch of the at-bat, but it would be caught in center field. And the bottom half, Aguilera remained on the mound. David Justice had a single with 1 out, then after a pop-out, he would steal second. And even with an 0-2 count, Greg Olson would draw a walk, bringing up Mark Lemke. And on the 3rd pitch, he would hit a single to score Justice and win Game 3 for the Braves, putting an end to the second 1-run game of the series and the longest World Series game at the time at 4 hours and 4 minutes. In Game 4, the Twins had their Game 1 star on the mound going up against John Smoltz, who was making his first start of the series. And as was the case in the first 3 games, the Twins scored first with a single in the 2nd, and the Braves would answer back with a Terry Pendleton solo home run in the 3rd. The Braves looked primed to score in the 5th, with Lonnie Smith on 2nd and no outs. Terry Pendleton would line one over Kirby Puckett's head, and despite getting a late start, Smith was sent home, which led to a collision at the plate, and Brian Harper held on to the ball. And later in the inning, on a wild pitch, Terry Pendleton tried to score, and he was also tagged out by Brian Harper. The score remained 1-1 until the top of the 7th, when Mike Pagliarulo drove in his 2nd run with a solo home run. Then the bottom half, with Carl Willis now pitching, the Braves responded with a solo home run of their own, hit by Lonnie Smith, to tie the game at 2. Mike Stan would strand a runner at the top of the 8th, then Carl Willis and Mark Guthrie would combine for a 1-2-3 bottom half, followed by Mike Stan's 1-2-3 top of the 9th. Then with 1 out in the bottom of the 9th, Mark Lemke had another chance to become a hero, and he would deliver with a triple in the left field gap. Then after an intentional walk, Jerry Willard hit a fly ball to shallow right, and in a bang-bang play, Lemke made it home safe despite the ball beating him to the plate, which the Twins could not believe. But with Harper never tagging Lemke, it was the right call, and it won the game and tied the series. Then in Game 5, Tom Glavine and Kevin Depani faced off again, and they both put up zeros for the first 3 innings. But that would change when the Braves would put up 4 in the 4th, brought upon by a David Justice 2-run home run, and an RBI triple by Mark Lemke, and an RBI double by Rafael Belliard. The Twins would get 3 back in the 6th, which put an end to Glavine's day, and this was still a 2-run game to that point. But then, the bottom of the 7th happened, and the Braves put up a 6 spot as the entire lineup got up to bat, with Mark Lemke hitting yet another triple. The Braves would add 3 more in the 8th, while the Twins added another 2 to give us a final score of 14-5, giving the Braves a series lead and huge momentum going back to Minnesota. and Game 6 had Steve Avery starting for the Braves on 3 days rest, while the Twins would counter with Scott Erickson. And just like in every game except Game 5, the Twins scored first with 2 in the first, including an RBI triple by a slumping Kirby Puckett. The Braves then had a runner on like they had in every inning in the third, and with 1 out, Ron Gant came up, and he drove one to deep left center. Then one of the greatest plays in World Series history occurred when a 5'8" Kirby Puckett would jump and rob Gant of an extra base hit before it could hit the 13-foot plexiglass. Puckett would throw an absolute strike to first, but it was a little off the line. Regardless, this was one of the most impressive and important plays you'll ever see. And after failing yet again to score in the fourth, the Braves finally broke through in the fifth, when after the Twins failed to turn a double play, Terry Pendleton hit a 2-run home run to tie the game. But the Twins would answer in the same inning with Kirby Puckett's sac fly, driving in a second run. Both Erickson and Avery would pitch 6 innings, with Erickson getting pulled in the 7th. And as Jack Buck described it, the series was on the line with Ron Gant coming up. And on the 3rd pitch of the at-bat, Gant hit what looked like a sure double play to short, but Gant's speed allowed him to beat it out, and tied the game at 3. And after Kirby Puckett was stranded at second in the 8th, both teams went down in order in the 9th. And for the second time in the series, the game was heading to extras. Rick Aguilera and Alejandro Pena would trade zeros in the 10th, and the top of the 11th, pinch runner Keith Mitchell was thrown out trying to steal. Aguilera would retire the next 2 batters, sending things to the bottom of the 11th, with the player of the game, Kirby Puckett, coming up. Game 1 starter Charlie LeBrant came in to face Puckett, who told Chili Davis he was planning to bunt, to which Davis replied, "Bunt my ass, hit it out, and let's go home." Puckett took a few pitches, unusual for him, then on the 4th pitch, he took Davis's request to heart by hitting one over the left center wall to win the game for the Twins, and allow Jack Buck to make his famous call.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett finished a double shot of the cycle, hit a walk-off home run, and made one of the greatest catches in World Series history, giving him one of the all-time performances in World Series history, only adding to this incredible series that was naturally heading to a 7th game. And in Game 7, we got a rematch Game 4 with Jack Morris and John Smoltz, and they would give us one of the greatest pitching duels in MLB history. After continuously escaping jams and breezing through innings, Smoltz and Morris put up nothing but zeros. The first scoring threat since the beginning of the game came in the 8th. Lonnie Smith led off the inning with a single, and on the 4th pitch against Terry Pendleton, he looked like he struck out. But after discussion, Don Denkinger ruled that the ball was tipped. With new life, Bobby Cox called for a hit and run. Smith took off, and Pendleton lined one in the left center gap, seemingly guaranteeing that Smith would score. But middle infielders Knobloch and Gagne deked Smith by pretending they were turning 2. Smith denies falling for it, but regardless, he stopped after running second to look at the ball, and because of this, he did not score. But still, the Braves had their best scoring chance, and Morris got Gant to weakly ground out to first. Then they intentionally walked David Justice to bring up a slumping Sid Bream, and it paid off as Sid Bream grounded into a 3-2-3 double play, which would end the scoring threat, only adding more to Smith's base running error. And the Twins would respond with their own scoring threat as pinch hitter Randy Bush led off with a single. Then with 1 out, Chuck Knobloch hit a single, which would end the night for John Smoltz. Mike Stan would come in, and just like David Justice, Kirby Puckett would be intentionally walked, which brought up Ken Hrbek, who had not got a hit since Game 3. Then just like Sid Bream, he hit into a double play to send the game to the 9th scoreless. Morris refused to come out of the game, and the decision paid off after he got a 1-2-3 top of the 9th. In the bottom half, Mike Stan gave up 2 leadoff singles, forcing Bobby Cox to bring in Alejandro Pena. He would get Shane Mack to ground into a double play, then an intentional walk would set up a force play. But that was not needed, as Paul Sorrento struck out. And for the 3rd time in the series, things were heading to extra innings. And for the first time since 1939, a World Series Game 7 was heading to extra innings. And after winning multiple arguments, Jack Morris would remain in the game. And just like the 9th, it was 1-2-3. The ground out he induced to Terry Pendleton was his 126th pitch, and the Twins hoped it would be his last. And their hopes went up when Dan Gladden led off the inning with a double. Knobloch would move in 3rd on a sac bunt, and Kirby Puckett was intentionally walked, bringing up Ken Hrbek. And though he was slow and slumping, he was also intentionally walked to lower the bases and bring up the pinch hitter Gene Larkin. And without wasting any time, he would line the first pitch to deep left over the outfield that was playing in, allowing Gladden to easily score and give the Twins their 2nd World Series title, and put a wrap to what is, in my opinion, the greatest World Series ever played. This was a series that had absolutely everything. We can just consider that the 3-run Game 1 was probably the 2nd worst game of the series. The series had controversy, come-from-behind wins, multiple extra inning games, and legendary performances on both sides, but none more than the one who was the first to meet Gladden at home, and Jack Morris, who arguably had the greatest pitching performance in MLB history, given the circumstances. And though it is a little controversial, this single game is probably the biggest reason he is in the Hall of Fame, showcasing how great and legendary the series was. But what adds even more to it was that both of these teams were in last place the previous year. Just a few tweaks in momentum, and they found themselves on the biggest stage. And though the Braves lost, they held on better for the long term, as they won 14 straight division titles starting that year. Meanwhile, the Twins didn't make the playoffs again until 2002. But during those years, they won the same number of titles, with the Braves coming close many times, but finally getting to the top in 1995. Either way, it was a story of two teams making drastic turnarounds and giving us the greatest World Series of all time, which means the White Sox and Rockies may give us a classic next year. Hopefully you liked this video, and if so, please consider liking and subscribing for new videos every week. Thank you.